Suffocated animals! 50 maimed animals! 50 poisoned animals! 50 anally electrocuted animals! 50 gassed animals! 50 bludgeoned to death animals! 50 hanged animals! 50 skinned alive animals! 50 dead animals!
The animals died quickly and humanely.
The fur industry can be extremely cruel to animals.
But experts say the fake fur industry also has issues. The microfibers which come off these materials are bad for the environment and not sustainable.
Fake fur is largely made out of petrochemicals, so from a sustainable perspective, it's really no good.
Fur is the most unnecessary thing in the world.
It's this bizarre cultural arrogance. I think it's time we turn that around, just as a question of social justice, and also to realize you can wear fur and enjoy it.
So about 2 years ago, I started following a vegan diet and I decided to cut out all animal products from my life entirely. Since I wasn't eating any animal products, I thought it only made sense not to wear any either. So I started shopping from vegan clothing brands and I realized that many other consumers were beginning to do the same as well, as vegan brands like Madigan became more popular. When some of the leading luxury fashion houses like Gucci, Versace, and Burberry went fur-free in 2018, I was sure that pretty soon everyone would stop wearing and selling real fur. But then I'd visit malls and I would see huge lines wrapped around Canada Goose stores. I'd see celebrities continuing to wear fur knowing they'd receive backlash, and I started to wonder why fur was still being worn. So I decided to do some research and I was shocked to find endless arguments suggesting that real fur can actually be the more ethical choice, and that fake fur is extremely harmful to the environment. But with so many conflicting arguments online, it's difficult to know what information out there is true. So I spoke with a number of industry professionals to explore the ethics, sustainability, and responsibility of real fur versus fake fur. Before jumping into the fur debate, I wanted to first find out what industry professionals think about the recent fur-free movement that's happening, how they feel about it, and if they think that it will last. So I first spoke with Philippa and Samantha Madigan of Furious Fur, a faux fur company that started in Toronto in 2016 and is already found worldwide and sold in the Bay, which is interesting considering the Bay started as a fur trading company but has now also decided to go fur-free.
So Furious Fur, we began of a love of modern vintage real fur, and we thought rather than wear real fur, we should take the quality and the silhouettes and the design of a lot of vintage real fur.
So we had a lot of, you know, like my grandma's, your mom's real fur coats that are so beautiful, and like we wear them all the time, but then kind of in today's climate, like you don't really feel that comfortable wearing them. And so with Philippa's production expertise, we were able to replicate these faux fur jackets to make them look as real and high quality as possible, to try and sort of steer people away and know that they can get that same quality and style by using faux fur instead of real fur. I mean, like, I don't think we've ever hidden the fact that our company came from a love of real fur, but we understand that it's, you know, consciously we can't wear them anymore.
I think it's a moral issue, and I think everyone has their personal opinion on the, you know, the ethics and the slaughtering of animals, if you want to put it that way.
And I think everyone's different. Everyone's always going to have a different opinion, whether it be for ethical reasons, religious reasons, I don't, we can only be who we are, and we don't like wearing animals, and we don't want any more to die for that. But I'm sure everyone's different.
I think a lot of people are going for free. A lot of people are eating less meat. The whole vegan movement is coinciding with that. The choices that people are making on their everyday life is completely shifting away from animal products. So in general, I do think it's a movement. I think more brands will probably follow. I think it's kind of like a phase we're going through.
The customer who they're talking to now isn't that interested in fur. I think you get a whole new generation of customers that didn't grow up. I grew up in the 70s, right? And in the 70s, in America, you had pets, ate steak, wore fur, and that was all fine. There was no sort of consciousness of about that those things don't really work together or make any sense. And I think now you get a millennial customer who didn't grow up with fur being this luxury item, so they don't have the kind of attachment to it, and they're much more savvy about the environment and about killing animals in general. So I think that it became just a matter of economics, really, for the big brands. I think that really helped them get to the other side. Suddenly everyone's talking about supply chain, sustainability, animal welfare, and it's a big win for them.
But of course, not everyone agrees with this fur-free movement, with many believing that it may actually cause more harm.
Currently, there's not really a better alternative for fur or for fake fur. And I believe by going fur-free without having a better alternative and introducing synthetics, which is something that globally plastics are such a huge problem and such a huge problem for our oceans, given the fact how much these companies produce, just the volume of clothing. I don't necessarily think that it was the best move.
And not everyone agrees that this movement will continue, with many suggesting that real fur will become popular again in the future.
The Brundtland Commission said sustainable use of a renewable resource. Fur is a renewable resource. There is nothing feels as luxurious as fur. Fur has a vitality, and it's just something that's irreplaceable. I think the luxury brands will go back to fur because there's no fake fur that can even compare.
Well, it's a trend right now until profits come in, and they will see that there's a big chunk of their market leaving and clientele leaving and not purchasing their goods because they are kind of known for fur and fur products, and that will quickly change when they see that the bottom dollar, the bottom end they're not meeting it. So all of a sudden they'll come back and they'll be fur friendly.
To begin exploring the fur debate, I knew I had to first tackle one of the biggest arguments in the fur debate, which is the issue of killing animals for fur fashion. Since the early 90s, with PETA's campaigns against the fur industry, fur has gained a negative reputation as being cruel and inhumane. Today, there are still hundreds of animal activist groups fighting for fur bans worldwide. But are these claims of cruelty all true? And what do professionals in the fur industry have to say about animal activists who make these claims?
These organizations, they take sympathy of people that are animal lovers of dogs and cats, not animal lovers of the fur industry. The fur industry and dogs and cats are two different things, and they're trying to mix the two together for sympathy to get donations.
So they see the odd YouTube videos, they see the pamphlets about like animals being caged, the cows, pigs, and chickens, all of that, or the videos of these animals being skinned alive. And it's a very visual, and then tie into that the humanization of the animals, making them cute and pet-like and whatnot. They are not cute. They are wild animals, which are vicious. So they're there to stand up for the rights. But at the same time, what I want to say is that they need to be educated. They have to understand my end of it. If I understand their end of it and where they're going from, take the 5 minutes and learn about my industry, right? Put your prejudice aside and learn about why we are in this business and why we do what we do and what we do to help the planet and what I guess you would say why we are environmentally friendly, right?
These things that they're saying it without evidence, right, and that without facts. They attack the fur industry because we don't have $1 billion to say, hey, you guys shut up.
So it's very clear that those in the fur industry feel that animal activists are misled with false information. If this is true, then how exactly are animals killed for fur fashion? I spoke with Paula Lishman, past president of the Fur Council of Canada, who explained to me a method of killing used for her fur fashion products.
And beaver do not die from drowning, they die from what's called hypoxia, so they are trapped underwater, and they basically lose oxygen and lose consciousness. So, you know, when a trapper pulls a beaver up, its lungs are not full of water, it hasn't struggled, it just, you know, a little valve flips in there and they just pass away.
Yeah, sadly animals did die for the garments, but I always say when we design, and I teach my students, we respect the animal that has given its life for us, and we have to respect it in a way that we respect the luxury of its life, that it gives us this luxury garment.
They probably saw a few videos of mistreating, because there are some videos that went viral like that, and people took it as kind of the industry standard when it's not. It's actually once in a blue moon, because the industry is super strict. If you look at the fur industry, how the animals are raised, how they're treated, it's an industry that had no choice but to evolve and had no choice but to be very, very strict on how these products are obtained. And it's actually an industry that's very responsible in the way it's treating animals, the way it's taking care of them their whole life, the way it's putting them to sleep at the end of their lives, so there is no suffering for the animal, and all that is very regulated.
But of course, those against the fur industry, like Jane Halevy of the International Anti-Fur Coalition, have a much more violent description of how animals are killed for fur fashion.
You've got different kinds of killings. For example, raccoon are beaten to death, crushed. Foxes and chinchillas are often electrocuted, vaginally and anally electrocuted. Also chinchilla, they break their neck. You've got minks which are gassed. You've got seals who are beaten to death or shot, or well, usually it's also clapped.
And if you look at the fur industry system, it's factory farming. It's really animals in cages, and they are not going to go out from the cages. They don't have access to water or to whatever you can make the life of an animal pleasant. They are going to stay in the cage, and then they are going to be gassed or killed. That's nobody can deny this fact.
However the animals killed, it's safe to say that killing animals for fashion comes down to your own personal opinions and beliefs on animal consumption. But with every industry, there's always trade-offs to keep in mind, and it's important to look at the issue of animal consumption in comparison to other pressing issues, like the prevalence of child labor in garment sweatshops.
Our industry has always been regulated. When my father came here, he was part of the Fur Union, which was part of the Meat Packers Association. And we were always controlled, and everything was monitored, and make sure everything was fair and equitable, and everything was being done the right way. This industry, like I showed you that magazine in 1985, it was regulated in 1985, it was regulated in 1975, in 1965, 55. But what's happened here in the last 30 years, because Canada's allowed importation from other countries, you don't know where the stuff is being made. You don't know if a 7-year-old child is making your t-shirt or your underwear or his pair of jeans. But they are being made. And without restrictions, and companies like H&M take advantage of the masses without having that appreciation of saying, where is this made and who's making it? You have people donating for animals, but these little children that are sacrificing themselves because they come from a third world country and they're not seen or heard, aren't as important as these animals. So which is more important? Is a question that has to be answered. Are these kids less important than the animals, Or the animals more important than the kids?
And if the concern is the ethical treatment of the animals, well, let's just bring that to a larger scale and look at what petroleum has done to the environment and how that affects animals on a large scale. So when we think of every oil spill and all of the environments that have been destroyed because of oil exploration and oil drilling, so that includes marine animals, land animals, and then the communities that live in those, that is far more damaging than fur has, because petroleum production is far greater than any fur production. Canada has very good regulations around the ethical treatment of fur, because the one thing that happens with fur is if you treat an animal badly, then you're going to get bad fur, and that cuts into your profit margins. So most companies, it's not to their advantage to buy from unethical suppliers who treat fur poorly or the animals poorly, because they get a poor quality product. So why put all that effort in? So here in Canada, we actually have fairly stringent regulations about how the animals are treated. It gets a little more dicey when we look at countries where China, and that's also because just their cultural values towards these animals is a lot different. They don't see them in the same way, so that's why they're less likely to be more ethical towards the treatment of the animals. And you do get quality that is less superior.
So there are clearly many trade-offs to keep in mind. Yes, animals are killed for fur fashion, but if they're killed in a humane way, can it be ethical after all? If the answer is no, the ethical alternative would seem to be fake fur, but shockingly, fake fur may do more harm than we think.
Given the fact that synthetic microplastics from garments is more prevalent than, say, microbeads and straws, which we see people reacting very strongly against, and we see the ban against the microplastics, those little micro pellets in our face scrubs and everything else, there's still nothing being addressed towards synthetic products, which is far more prevalent and contaminating than both of those two.
Everybody that buys Canada Goose and petroleum-based products or fake fur, they're not educating themselves what they're really buying. I went to a restaurant a couple of months ago and the girl said, we're no longer going to be serving straws. The reason they're not going to be serving straws is because it's plastic. Plastic, it's petroleum-based. Again, it causes harm. Where? The oceans. If that causes harm to the oceans, and that's just a straw, just how much pollution is being caused with all these products that I'm saying that are petroleum-based with outer shells that aren't natural?
When it means it doesn't biodegrade, it doesn't biodegrade. And all of our synthetics that are being washed and cleaned, and even washed in the sense of prior to it being actual clothing, all those microorganisms are now floating into the ocean that we all hear. So everyone's against. Like in the 70s when I was born, it was all the little plastic rings that would get around the dolphins and fishes, the necks of dolphins and fish. And now it's straws and plastic water bottles, but now it's all the little filaments that we can't actually see that get washed into the oceans that are actually being washed into the seas, which means that translates into it going, fish eating it, and the fish that we catch and we cook, we're now eating into it. So there's actually studies showing that in actual human stool, there are traces of microorganism. So sadly, my generation will be dead by then, where we won't really see the impact. It won't be our kids, it'll be our kids' kids and our kids' kids. So the third generation that will see the impact of those microorganisms. What new viruses, what new illnesses, what new cancers are being created because we are now ingesting those non-biodegradable plastic.
We ourselves right now are contaminated with plastics and have microplastics in our body. A lot of those microfibers in the ocean right now make their way into our water systems, and most local systems for water treatment have not been set up to capture those. So we are ingesting those synthetics currently. Those synthetic fibers are in our body as well.
The environmental impact of real fur versus fake fur is another huge argument in the fur debate. And in this case, real fur does seem to have an advantage because it does biodegrade, unlike fake fur, which is petroleum-based and will not break down over time.
You have the International Fur Federation that collects this data, that did a study just recently about fake fur and real fur. And if the fake fur biodegrades, if the real fur is biodegradable, it's a natural product. It's recyclable, but it's biodegradable. If you take a faux fur, again, I have no idea why they have to use fur as a connotation, because fur, by definition, it's a fiber. Fiber means something natural.
Buying fur is a really good way to buy less because you will keep it for a long time. You will pass it on. You will recycle it. Unlike faux fur that you will not do that with because it's just not feasible. It's a product that has a certain smell, and after a year or two, a season or two, you can no longer wear it. Like, it's very rare that people keep those for a long time. Then they throw them back. It's a petroleum-based product, like plastic, that goes back into landfill and doesn't biodegrade.
It is a luxury garment that we pass on, which becomes heritage, which becomes history, which becomes a story, there's always something behind a fur coat. So you're not only buying local, supporting local, being environmentally friendly, you're buying and sharing history, because furs are generational. So there is always a story with every coat that comes through here, whether it's an old one, and even with the new one, there is always a story, and it's the only way we can share our story, and it's something that is tangible, luxurious, that can continue to live on after we leave.
What I found interesting is that fake fur companies openly admit that fake fur does have some sort of environmental impact. Instead of being deceitful, they admit that it is not perfect, but make it clear that fake fur is not any worse than real fur, and that they are consistently working on lessening the environmental impact of fake fur production.
Faux fur is not supposed to be more perfect than perfection. All fibers, we know that, have an environmental burden. So, of course, faux fur has an impact. Just like cotton, just like leather, just like real fur, all fibers have an impact. So we are not more perfect than the other.
Faux fur is faux, so it's not 100% eco-friendly. Our mission is to have people purchase one of our items that they're going to keep for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, like we did with our real fur coats.
And I think that is sort of a little bit of a thing that gets tied in with the non-eco-friendly argument of faux fur, is that real fur coats, I mean, sure, I guess they could potentially be biodegradable, but the thing about them is people keep them for 60 years because they're so well made. So we want our coats to never end up in a landfill. We want people to be able to have them for 60 years and pass them down to their kids so that they never end up there in the first place.
So there's a lot of false information, and faux fur, listen, it's not any worse than probably half of the things you have on now. Not to say that it's perfect, but I think we're all working on making it more perfect. We have a fur that's made from 100% recycled bottles, and like I said, we're working with chemists at Cradle to make compostable faux fur. So innovation takes time.
A final argument of the fur debate that's very important to touch on is how the fur industry supports people and their livelihoods. From trappers and farmers to hunters, the fur industry supports families worldwide.
Okay, so this whole movement of banning fox farms in Scandinavia, fur farms, mink farms in Canada, you know what? I think, again, it stems from ignorance. Like, you have to understand that, like the food industry, we have to, animals are bred for either food, in this case, in our case, it's for fur, right? I think banning them is sort of, I don't think they understand, because then you're going to put a whole strain of people out of business, okay? I know that California is in the process, and I don't think it will ever pass, that they ban fur and leather type product manufacturing. They're already banning retailers from carrying luxury items such as fur and all that. So all of this banning, I think, stems from, again, like I said, it's the lack of knowledge. So I think if you do start banning them, you're going to put all of these people out of businesses, generations and generations of family who've been running farms like this. But then it's also going to impact the other industries.
It's also specifically important to keep in mind indigenous communities in which fur hunting, trapping, and wearing real fur is a huge part of their culture, heritage, and tradition, and is still done today. However, their use of fur is done much more for warmth and functionality rather than mass production and consumption.
When we go, way up north and we see, Inuits, how they live and stuff, like their approach to something like fur is completely different from ours. For them, it's part of their culture, it's their heritage, it's how they sustained their livelihood for centuries, and to them they come at it from a completely different point of view. It's very respectful, and the entire animal is used, and it's not killed for commerce. It's really part of them and just their survival. And when we go to other cities where we see that fur is very appreciated, a lot of people as well, it's not, they're not buying a new fur coat every year the way synthetics are bought, or a lot of fur-like products. So fake fur is bought on a more frequent basis because it doesn't have that longevity the way real fur does. And people who are proponents of real fur, not for fashion, but for actual survival in these cold temperatures, they also have a different attitude. It's something you buy once, and it's something that you have for 30 years. It's not something you get rid of, and a lot of people usually also tend to buy the vintage fur when it comes to sort of that perspective.
So it's all about respect. So when we shoot an animal for food, we utilize every part of that animal that we possibly can. We put down tobacco, which is, our medicine, and something that we give as saying thank you to that animal's spirit for giving up its life. So it's not about mass consumption. It's about doing things in a humane way, and actually, especially now, because there are so many human beings on this planet, the animal population is getting pushed out of areas, and they're also, if they don't have any natural predators in those areas, their population just explodes. And as part of managing or being stewards of the earth, you have to manage those populations in a sustainable and humane way. As far as real fur, it is something that we have as Indigenous people have used as time immemorial, and it's something that lasts for generations and generations, and there's nothing warmer, there's nothing more practical or sustainable.
So it is an artisan, it's a craftsmanship that's dying, that we need to keep supporting, because if we don't and we can't get young people interested, it's literally gonna die. It's gonna disappear. Like the tailoring and like all of those other haute couture businesses, if we can't keep it alive, it will disappear.
The nature of working with fur and leather is such that you have to cut each one at a time. You can't, punch out like hundreds of units like you can with other materials. And there's craftsmanship involved. And these are special items that, are not really going to impact the environment in any way compared to, synthetic and plastic materials that are being used now. So it's a way of life. People that do work with those materials and manufacture with them have a respect and understanding of what they're doing. And I think it's vitally important to keep those things alive.
So, is it really possible to decide which industry is more ethical? At the end of the day, it really does come down to your own personal values, opinions, and beliefs on the importance of animal welfare, the health of our planet, or the importance of supporting other people's livelihoods.
They're both harmful. Just to set the record straight, they're both harmful. But really, when it comes down to it, if we're to really look at it from the big perspective, fake fur is a petroleum product. And right now, that is one of the biggest concerns that we have, is we really need to reduce our reliance on petroleum products, and that includes fake fur. So it really kind of comes down to what you really believe in, and longevity, quality, keeping it in your closet. Those are kind of the best things. So whichever one you choose, you kind of have to make that decision yourself, just knowing that there are those trade-offs, and really one is not significantly better than the other, but at least fur biodegrades. So that's kind of the one big advantage that fur does, and finding someone who is ethical and the fur has come from an ethical source where the animals are treated well, you know, is a better thing, because petroleum does not treat animals well, and we've seen numerous oil spills and how the environment has been contaminated through petroleum. That's faux fur is a direct result of that.
With every industry, there's always going to be some sort of environmental impact. What we can do as consumers is support responsible companies that are actively making innovative changes to lessen their environmental impacts. If you're against the use of animals for fashion, try a faux fur coat that's made from recycled plastic water bottles, as House of Fluff and EcoPel is creating. If you're against petroleum-based products, try a vintage fur coat that's been remodeled. The most important thing is for us to be aware and informed of the products we're purchasing and the companies we're supporting. As Kim Canter of House of Fluff said, innovation takes time. The fashion industry has the potential to be a huge catalyst for positive change in the world, and I cannot wait to see what the future of fashion has in store. Thanks so much for watching.